If you would please open your books, your big atheist books, to page 169. 169. So this is the last chapter we'll do before Christmas, okay? And you won't have a quiz over this chapter. It'll be part of your test. Does that make sense? Okay, great. Mother Teresa versus Hitler. We hold these truths to be self-evident that all men, women, are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. The Declaration of Independence. Is there a standard? My friend Dave and I were just finishing dinner at a dockside restaurant in Portland, Maine, when the conversation turned to religion. I don't think one religion can be exclusively true, Dave said. But it seems like you, Frank, have found a center. You have found something that's true for you, and I think that's great. Playing along with his premise that something could be true for one person but not for another, I asked, Dave, what's true for you? What makes life meaningful for you? He said, making money and helping people. Now, Dave is a very successful businessman, so I pressed him a little bit more. I said, Dave, I know CEOs who have reached the pinnacle of business success. They planned and achieved great things in their business life, but have planned nothing and achieved little in their personal lives. They're now facing retirement and they're asking themselves, now what? Dave agreed and added, yeah, and I know that most of those CEOs have experienced nasty divorces, mostly because they ignored their families in pursuit of a buck. But I'm not like that. I will not sacrifice my family for money. And in my business, I want to help people as well. I commended him for his commitment to his family and his desire to help people, but questions still remain. Why should we be faithful to our families? Who said we should help people? Is helping people a universal moral obligation, or is it just true for you but not for me? And to what end should you help them? Financially, emotionally, physically, spiritually? I said, Dave, if there's no objective standard, then life is nothing but a glorified monopoly game. You can acquire lots of money and lots of property, but when the game is over, it's all going back in the box. Is that what life is all about? Uncomfortable with the direction of the conversation, Dave quickly changed the subject. But his sense that he ought to help people was correct. He just had no way of justifying it. Why did he think he should help people? Where did he get such an idea? And why do you and I, deep down, agree with him? Stop and marinate on that point for a minute. Aren't you just like Dave? Don't you have this deep-seated sense of obligation that we all ought to help people? We all do. Why? And why do most human beings seem to have their that same intuitive sense, just intuition, like just knowing it inside, that they ought to do good and shun evil, turn away from evil? Behind the answers to those questions is more evidence for the theistic God. This evidence is not scientific. That's what we've seen in previous chapters, but moral in nature. Like the laws of logic and mathematics, this evidence is non-material, but it's just as real. The reason we believe we ought to do good rather than evil, the reason we, like Dave, believe we should help people, is because there's a moral law that has been written on our hearts. In other words, there is a prescription to do good that has been given to all of humanity. Some people call this moral prescription conscience. Others call it natural law. Still others, like our founding fathers, refer to it as nature's law. We refer to it as the moral law. But whatever you call it, the fact that a moral standard has been prescribed on the minds of all human beings points to a moral law prescriber. Every prescription has a prescriber. The moral law is no different. Someone must have given us these moral obligations. The moral law is our third argument for the existence of a theistic God, after the cosmological and teleological arguments. Every beginning had a beginner, right? Had a cause. The universe had a beginning, so the universe had a cause. Every design had a designer. The universe has a complex design, therefore, the universe has a designer. And now the moral law goes like this. Every law has a lawgiver. There is a moral law. Therefore, there is a moral lawgiver. If the first and second premises are true, then the conclusion necessarily follows. Of course, every law has a lawgiver. There can be no legislation unless there's a legislature. Moreover, if there are moral obligations, there must be someone to be obligated to. But is it really true that there is a moral law? Our founding fathers thought so. As Thomas Jefferson wrote in the Declaration of Independence, nature's law is self-evident. You don't use reason to discover it, you just know it. Perhaps that's why my friend Dave hit a roadblock in his thinking. He knew helping people was the right thing to do, but he couldn't explain why without appealing to a standard outside himself. Without an objective standard of meaning and morality, then life is meaningless and there's nothing absolutely right or wrong. Everything is merely a matter of opinion. When we say the moral law exists, we mean that all people are impressed with a fundamental sense of right and wrong. Everyone knows, for example, that love is superior to hate and that courage is better than cowardice. University of Texas at Austin professor you figured out, Badashevsky, I don't know, writes, everyone knows certain principles. There is no land where murder is virtue and gratitude is vice. C.S. Lewis, who has written profoundly on this topic in his classic work, Mere Christianity, my favorite book, put it this way. Think of a country where people were admired for running away in battle, or where a man felt proud of double-crossing all the people who had been kindest to him. You might just as well try to imagine a country where 2 and 2 made 5. In other words, everyone knows there are absolute moral obligations. An absolute moral obligation is something that is binding on all people at all times in all places. An absolute moral law implies an absolute moral lawgiver. Now, this does not mean that every moral issue has easily recognizable answers, or that some people don't deny that absolute morality exists. Morality exists. These are difficult problems in morality, and people suppress and deny the moral law every day. It simply means that there are basic principles of right and wrong that everyone knows, whether they admit it or not. Badashevsky says that a basic knowledge of right and wrong, what can't not be known, in his book by that title. So he calls the basic knowledge of right and wrong what we can't not know, in his book. We can't not know, for example, that it is wrong to kill innocent human beings for no reason. Some people may deny it and commit murder anyway, but deep in their hearts, they know murder is wrong. Even serial killers know murder is wrong. They just may not feel remorse. And like all absolute moral laws, murder is wrong for everyone, everywhere, in America, India, Zimbabwe, and in every other country, now and forever. That's what the moral law tells every human heart. And we're going to stop there, and then we're going to turn to your little atheist book. And we're going to do this together as well. So we'll just keep the video rolling. We're going to skip the emboldened for now. We'll get to them tomorrow. We're going to start with the equip. We're going to do numbers 1 through 4 in the equip. So I'm at the bottom of page 51. So what are some different names for the moral law? Your book calls it the moral law, but what else has it been called in writings throughout time? What?
Conscience.
Conscience. Conscience, which is spelled conscience. What else? Natural law. What's the third one? Nature's law. So conscience, natural law, and nature's law. So look at, once you're done with that, look at page 171 and write out the argument for the moral law. So it's 1, every law has a lawgiver. 2, there is a moral law. 3, therefore there is a moral lawgiver. So go ahead and write that from your book. Then look up at me when you're done so I know. So once again, the logical argument for the moral law is that every law has a lawgiver. That's 1. Number 2, there is a moral law written on everyone's heart. Number 3, therefore, there is a moral lawgiver. Now, also look on page 171. There's a sentence there, and you're going to fill in those blanks. So fill in the blanks for that sentence, and then we'll talk through it once you're done. Okay, so let's read this aloud together. Without an objective standard of meaning and morality, then life is meaningless. And there's nothing absolutely right or absolutely wrong. Everything is merely a matter of opinion. Very good. Number 4. When we say the moral law exists, what does that mean? Yes. Yes. All people, deep within them, even if they don't show it, have a fundamental sense of what is right and what is wrong. Now, you may say, well, what about a serial killer? Or what about a person who persistently lies? Or what about those people know those things are wrong. They just still do them. And one of the points that they will make shortly in this chapter is if you lie to them, then they know it's wrong. Right? So all people have a fundamental sense of what is right and what is wrong. So that's what it means to say the moral law exists. Okay, any questions on this? Excellent. You have the rest of the hour to work on the study guide I gave you. I would use that time wisely if I was you, because that test is going to come up on you, and you want to have this study guide.
What's the day that you do?
It's a big test.
What day?
I don't know yet. When we're done with chapter 7,
So it'll be longer than a week from Friday.
I'll know next week what it is. I think it will be longer than a week from Friday.